And welcome back, wizards and muggles alike, to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast, where you subscribe for weekly videos exploring deeper knowledge of the universe and of self. Please don't forget to hit that like button to increase our reach, and don't forget to subscribe as well. And let's dive right in. So tonight we will be getting to the third of the 8. So this is the final installment of this rune series exploring the Elder Futhark. And as we've sort of explored in the previous episodes as an overview to these runes, is that the first set are very much dealing with the physical world and mastering really just the basics of existence. And then when we get to the second, once we've been building up that energy, that strength, the second is more to do with refinement and purification and just really like getting ready to focus in. And then in this final set of 8, we're really getting to that point of the final tier where you've kind of become self-actualized and you're really learning how to direct this energy in a focused kind of way. So Brian, would you like to add anything as far as introduction goes before we get into it?
Yeah, just that, like as Logan was saying, these are built off of each other. So if you haven't checked out the first 2 episodes on the first 8 and the second 8, go check those out. But, again, it shows this, as we mentioned before, it shows this progression through life that, first you're having to master the physical body and learning how to take care of yourself and how to interact with other beings. Then the second 8 deals with the emotional and psychological level. And after we as human beings start to really psychologically and emotionally develop ourselves, that's when we can really start stepping into the place to receive the knowledge of the third 8 runes, which we'll be talking about tonight, where we actually start taking it into the higher level, the spiritual plane. So these last 8 runes are very, very powerful. Some of my favorite runes to work with are contained within these. So very excited to dive into these.
All right. Well, would you like to get us started with the first rune?
Absolutely. So our very first rune is Tiwaz. It looks, simply like an arrow pointed upwards. So very simple. This is the rune of, it represents victory. This is the rune of the god Tyr, who is the god of war in the Norse pantheon. And this is, it's very helpful to understand one of the mythologies here about the god Tyr. And it's that when the giant wolf Fenris, who keeps, to do a short version of it, this wolf, Loki fathers this wolf, and this wolf starts growing to such an extent that he threatens to, the gods are afraid he's going to consume the whole world. So they go to bind Fenrir, and the first 2 chains break, and then they go have the dwarves forge a magical chain. And Fenrir agrees to have it put on him, but he felt like there was some kind of trickery behind it. So in order to do that, he said one of the gods had to, then put their arm in his mouth, and Tyr was the one that did that. So when we think of Tyr, and this Tiwaz rune, it really is that essence of him being willing to put his arm in this giant wolf's mouth, and and his arm gets ripped off because of it. But it's being willing to sacrifice yourself to overcome this really intense force that can potentially devour everything. And it's a rune of not just a single sacrifice, but that constant perseverance, that constant discipline of being willing to live as a spiritual warrior, make those sacrifices, and lose things in order to achieve what you need to achieve.
Right. Yeah. That's the main thing that I connect this rune to with is as you said, being a spiritual warrior without hesitation. I mean, you are 100% dedicated to this life, even at the expense of your limbs. Like you're willing to do whatever it takes to. You're dedicated to the struggle, I guess, is a way that you could put that. In as you said, willing to sacrifice. And this god of Tu or Tyr, there's you could say it either way. This is probably one of the most ancient gods that we can trace all the way back to early man.
The original Skyfather.
The Skyfather as well, not just in the Germanic ones, You know, you have, you know, Jupiter is actually two, you know, two and Jew are actually related there phonetically. So two is where we get Tuesday from, for example, for one thing. And you could also, it could be D or do. That is also, you know, that those variations are what are found throughout all, pretty much all of the ancient myths there. And of the second eight is Hagalaj, which is corresponds to Hel or Hola or Hela, which is that primordial mother god. So it's that Mother Earth and Father Sky dynamic, and even kind of ironic that it looks like an arrow pointing upwardly. So, so this is, again, you're taking that first step into being a true spiritual warrior after you've gone through major transformation, putting to death those aspects of yourself, and now you're really like moving into that true essence as like an activated human. And so the next rune is Berkano, which is this one here. It looks like a bee, and this translates to birch, like the birch tree, which can be, you know, connected phonetically in the Germanic to bracht, like, which is where we get the word bright. So it really means bright, and even the birch tree is a, you know, a very pure bright white color, and this means multiple things. So from the perspective of the Ice Age, you know, Northern European there, the birch tree was one of the first trees to emerge in when, you know, the turning of the seasons and moving into, you know, the end of winter. This represented renewal. It was that spring and a cleansing energy for multiple reasons. So if you burn birch bark, it's actually very flammable, and it pops and crackles and turns bright colors and everything. So you can kind of see that purification there. But also they would make their brooms out of birch wood, which is why we have the connection of witches and brooms. But this was, you know, the brooms were used in not only to actually clean their homes, but it represented spiritual cleansing as well. So just, you know, new beginnings, cleansing, sort of renewal, that sort of thing. And that's Berkano.
Yeah, and you know, when we look at the bark, it's excellent fire starter. So it's something that's starting that spark, starting that transformational process. So definitely a very interesting rune to work with. It, you know, very much has the essence of spring to it. If you just kind of think about that energy of the renewal of spring. So when we're looking, you know, remembering all these runes build off of each other, when we're stepping into Tiwaz, stepping into being willing to make that constant sacrifice as a spiritual warrior. And then the next rune is learning how to master a renewal of self. So it's all, you know, this theme of always being willing to sacrifice and then be renewed, because this is the spiritual process of, you know, the alchemical process where you're constantly being willing to die to yourself and go through deeper and deeper transformations to come to a higher state of awareness.
So would you like to introduce the next one?
Yeah, so the next rune is Ehwaz, which this translates to horse. And this is a rune that's all about intuition. So we can kind of look at, if you've ever, you know, spent any time riding horses, you'll kind of notice and learn that there's this intuitive connection between a really well trained horse and a rider, that a lot of times the horse will just kind of know what you want it to do. And in the same way, we need to learn how to ride our intuition. Sometimes our intuition may feel like it kind of comes out of nowhere, you know, it just hits us, but then we need to figure out how to master that and learn how to ride it and, you know, have it help guide us where we need to go. And there's also, you know, some interesting connection here with, in the mythology, Odin rides an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir, which can also be representative of this here. You could also look at this, not only is this the Yggdrasil, the tree of life, the helm of Ob, but you could also look at it as Sleipnir. And Sleipnir is the 8-legged horse Odin rides to slip between, his name translates to slipper. He uses it to slip between the different worlds, to travel to the different worlds. And then on top of that, in the ancient Germanic culture, the priests that usually worked with Odin, they had sacred groves where they would keep pure white horses, and they used these horses for divination. So depending on the certain footfalls and motions and things the horse did, they would then divine information out of that in order to figure out what the god, specifically Odin, was trying to tell them. So, you know, I think a lot of interesting connection here with this rune. But it really kind of shows you that power of the intuition, that when you can learn to tap into that in a full way and learn it, that it will carry you, you know, great distance where you need to go. Like get riding a horse, especially if you're thinking about, you know, in ancient times, riding a horse is going to be a lot more efficient than having to walk the whole way yourself. So that intuition, very powerful tool when you can learn how to tap into it.
Mm. So the next rune is probably one of both of our favorites, just because it has so much depth to it, and there's so many different ways you can look at it, and we're not even going to really even be able to scratch the surface in this introductory video. But again, we will be doing more videos in the future on the runes and kind of taking different approaches and looking at different aspects. So again, this is meant to be a very introductory, sort of surface level touch on each of the runes in that perspective. So the next rune here is Mannaz, and this essentially means divine being or true human, which, you know, the idea of being a true man. So, you know, that's the Mannaz. This is a very lost term in our modern world here, where you know, this idea of mankind being a man, woe man, what does this actually mean? It's actually a genderless concept. Being a true mon, back in the ancient times, the word mon could relate to mind and moon as well. There's a reason all these words sound similar, and that's because as we talked about, the sowilo is the soul, the mon is the mind, that, like the moon, reflects the light of the sun. So this is that sort of everything is the same in a different way, complicated simplicity aspect, where each mind is different, but reflecting that light of the soul that we all share, essentially. And so what this really means is stepping into our true self, kind of like that Isa rune that we discussed before, where you have individual form, but you're allowing the light of that soul to shine through. And that unified mind, you know, Brian, would you like to expand on that concept a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, again, you know, the Germanic people, and from the pagan perspective, you're really looking at nature for all these lessons, because as through the law of correspondence, by observing without, you can also observe aspects within. And this is one of my favorite really understandings, is that, you know, they had the same three words for human being, mind, and moon. And I think it's very interesting to notice that, you know, the moon reflects the light of the sun, of the soul that you were talking about. So to really step into our highest mind, we need to be able to tap into that soul and to reflect that light back. And also, building off the rune before, you know, being able to tap into that higher mind, we first have to be able to master our intuition. So I think, you know, and if we actually look at the structure of the two runes, very, very similar. You know, Ehwaz is actually contained within the Mannaz rune. So I find that very interesting, that as a divine mind, it's not just about the intellectual mind, but it's also being able to tap into the intuitive mind, the creative mind. So definitely, you know, a great rune to work with, and it's one that we'll probably be doing in a very in-depth breakdown on, you know, in future episodes, as we kind of go through and pull some more esoteric lessons out of these runes.
Right.
But the next rune.
Well, one second.
Sorry.
This also kind of struck me today when I was doing a bit of studying, this idea of looking at the word human as well. Human. It's the combination of the word hu and man, or mon. And again, this is not a gender specific concept. You know, humanity is one family of people, but hu, it just struck me to look at the the etymology of this word. So from the Old English, hue or how, meaning form or appearance, and of Germanic origin, and then related to the Swedish by skin or complexion, and then that came to mean more about, like an artistic term, like the different hues of color and things like that. But really, there's a lot of sort of symbolism that you can look at there, where almost thinking of the what as being the absolute of the singularity of something. Again, with this complicated simplicity concept, the what is that simplicity of the unified, the singular, and then the how, or the hue. Think about the meaning of the word how: infinite possibility. Well, here's the what, but how? What form can this take in the world of, possibilities? Or what is that? What's the scold? I believe is the future.
Yeah, skuld.
Skuld, yes. So you're just relating these ideas, and then the idea, and I'm just kind of addressing this sort of social justice idea of, we're cutting out man from everything. You noticed this, this whole. It's just amusing because these people clearly have no concept of this history, of the true meaning of this word mon, and how even the word woe man, I saw somebody commented recently, it's only a matter of time before they remove the man out of the title of woman altogether. And even that I just find interesting, because the idea of woe man is implication of almost something greater, is that mon, but also with the ability to bring life into through the womb man. So I don't see that as a negative or a inferior term at all. Again, this concept of mon, I think, is something that would bring a lot of insight in general to something that many people seem pretty unaware of in general.
So that what hit me there when you were saying that is that hue, if it can be form, and then mon is the divine mind. I find it very interesting that, we, being a human being, we are embodied, we're the form of the divine mind. We're coming into this physical incarnation as part of the all in order to have an experience. So very interesting point there, I think, to look at, to even pull even deeper meaning from that. So I really like that you brought that up. Thank you. That moves us into,
this is what we are, but then how or hue will that manifest as an individual, through your culture, through your, as we talked about in the recent episode about white guilt, the Hopi myth of the different races embodying the different elements, and how there's beauty in that diversity as well, even though we share that one common spirit.
Absolutely. And this, moving into the next rune here, which is Laguz, which is probably my favorite rune to work with, but I'm a Pisces ascendant in the Vedic tradition, so it makes a lot of sense. Laguz is the rune. It translates to lake, but what it's really referring. So this is dealing with diving into a deeper emotional. It's very interesting. In the Norse mythology, we have a couple different instances of wells being sources of wisdom. There's the well of Ymir that Odin sacrifices his eye in to gain wisdom. And then there's also the well of Ur that the Norns are weaving and, recording everything that happens in history goes into this well of Ur. So it's this deep, vast source of knowledge. So I find it very interesting. These are something that we can definitely see Laguz being connected with. And this is a great rune that anytime if you're really wanting to invoke some emotional stimulation, like if you really want to go deep with it, this is a rune you can absolutely work with, and it will give you that result. You have anything to add on that, Logan?
Yeah, totally. So what this means to me is it's the dark waters of the unknown. Just think about the iceberg and then down into the depths. So when you're in the dark and you can't see, what do? We have eyes, or using the light. And another thing that struck me as interesting is the lock being the Laguz, and the Gaelic word for lake is loch, you know, like Loch Ness, is associated with Njord, who is the god of law. And anyone who's studied maybe Jordan Maxwell or Santos Bonacci or someone like that, it knows full well that generally our justice courts are dealing in maritime law. So here's another one of those, you know, instances where knowing your history, you start to see the backstory of a lot of these institutions and what they're building in this down or locked up because the law is governing that. You know, the wordplay is very much relevant. And again, lots of even researchers and people that are into etymology, myself included for a long time, really focused mostly on the Latin and Greek roots, but largely missed out on realizing just how much the Germanic language also is very much at play in a lot of the words that we use. And even, you know, again, like the days of the week are all very much related to Nordic mythology, Tuesday, Thursday, things like that. So that's what I have on Laguz. So
I have a quick thing to add on that too, that I find, you know, very interesting. So in the Germanic culture, a lot of times there was this understanding that the bodies of water that surrounded a certain tribal area would kind of act like a reservoir for the collective memory of the subconscious and unconscious of that people. So when we saw a lot of, you know, when Christianity started moving into Ireland and things like that, they always went around and they were always trying to, you know, banish these demons or do an exorcism on these lochs, these lakes, these bodies of water. And that was really what it was, is attack on the pagan, the indigenous subconscious and unconscious mind. So they were trying to get out all of that charge and then instill their new version of, you know, essentially this mind virus that disconnected us from all those ancestral traditions. So, you know, these are deep, deep waters that you can dive into with this rune. And again, as we've mentioned before, if you really want to know, we're just giving a very basic surface level intellectual understanding of these. But if you want to get to know them, you have to work with them personally. And this is one rune that you will get so much value from if you choose to work with it.
Yeah. Wow. That actually completely blew my mind there, how profound that is, as far as what you said about them having this idea about water being a sort of a storage of psychic energy, because this is another one of these examples, as we've been looking at, of where these ancient understandings are actually very much in alignment with modern day scientific discoveries. I mean, look at the work of, say, Dr. Emoto and his water experiments.
Water holds memory.
It does. It really, it's that feminine, you know, again, think about this from a cosmic law, energetic standpoint. The feminine is all about reception. So to receive and then to bear, you know, it's all there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's the rune of Laguz. And then moving from that one into the next rune, which is Ingwaz, which is this one. And this is another one that sort of is in a linear fashion. As we just looked at Laguz, which is all about water. And one last thing that I forgot to mention is that this rune is not only one about deep emotions and the subconscious as far as working with that, but also ultimately the mastery over these emotions. Because again, if you're looking at this on a timeline, a progression, or a shamanic initiation through the runes beginning at the top here, you can look at the phases like, you know, being an infant and feeding mother's milk and going on, and then through the psychological, you're kind of in a state of teenagerhood where you're a fully formed person physically, but you're still developing mentally and emotionally and all this kind of thing. And then finally becoming an adult. Big part about being an adult is kind of starting to learn to master those emotions. So again, very important to look at this in a holistic form of the progression through and the way they all build on each other. So again, the next rune is Ingwaz, which is the sacred fire, or specifically internal fire. So the Germanic people, they actually had two words for fire. Fire itself actually meant an external fire, like what you would build at camp to keep warm and cook food and things like that. And then this Ing, or Ingwaz, is the internal fire. And this again is similar in the way of what Laguz is dealing with, that cleansing. What is that fire? But actually softening those hard metals into something malleable. And I thought this was interesting that an ingot, there's that word ing again, Ingwaz, ingot, is a made into different sort of things. So it had to go through that purification process in order to be ready to take a different form. And I guess I'll let you riff on that for a little bit before I have a couple of other notes here as well. But
Awesome. Yeah, and this is the rune that is associated with the god Frey. And Frey is he's one of the Vanir, so he's associated with fertility and things. And many times Frey is actually, if you look at ancient carvings and things, he's pictured with an erect phallus. And that's because it's showing the mastery of his sexual energy, the masculine energy. And this is a rune that deals with our Kundalini energy. If you actually look at it, it looks like it's, two serpents crossing the spinal cord, much like Kundalini. So this is mastering that sexual energy, that charge, and being able to purify it in a way of that it's actually going to bring you into a higher state of awareness. So you're learning with Laguz the mastery of the waters, the emotions, the feminine. Then with Ingwaz, you're coming into the mastery of fire, the masculine energy.
Right, because Frey's full name is actually Ingwanar Frey, which that Nar meaning master, and then Ing meaning fire. So what that actually translates to is Frey, master of fire, essentially, and that Kundalini energy, as you said. And one
it also
final
relates
thing,
to sorry. A lot of times fireplaces, especially, you see in like England, they're referred to as an inglenook. So this is the place in the home where not only sacrificial fires can be burnt, but it's a place where there's that gathering of people, that gathering of energy. Something very interesting to look at as well.
Right. Yeah. And then that was where they would gather to tell stories and myths. And it was also a place of gathering because what's a great way to bring people together? Food. So they would use the fire to cook, which again is another, that alchemical purification through fire of, cleansing meat through the impurities and then the diseases and things like that. And that's great that you brought that up, because that actually relates perfectly with this another observation that I noticed, where you can kind of relate this to the Sacred Heart. If you look at the symbol of the Sacred Heart, it's a heart that's on fire. I actually use this in my own personal music production brand, Heartfire Visions, because I really like the symbolism of that. But the hearth relates to the heart. I would say that actually is very connected in a symbolic way. What's that?
It's the heart of the home.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, exactly. So the hearth is the heart, and that Sacred Heart is that fire. And again, fire is also something very associated with the action, that very masculine, burning fire. When light a fire under their ass is going to make them like take action and do something. And in the English language, the suffix that we add to words to turn them into a verb or an action form is ing, the ing. If you're something ing, that means you are taking an action, which is that fire element there.
Excellent point.
So is this let's see, we've got two left. Did you want to introduce?
Yeah, I can get into this. So the next rune here that we see is Dagaz. So these last two runes, sometimes kind of people may confuse the order of them, but they are supposed to be in the order of Dagaz being the third rune, or Dayaj, it can be pronounced either way. and Othala being the last rune, which we'll get to in a minute. So Dagaz translates to day or luck. So this is the rune that represents that, you know, when you're standing in the light of the midday sun, and remember the sun is the soul. So when you're standing in the brightest light and warmth of your soul, that is when you're going to be experiencing the most luck. And when we can think about being in Ice Age culture, we could see that probably being in the light of the full sun would feel very lucky, you know, because it could be very cold out, you know, so having that warmth from the sun would make you feel like you're having a really lucky day. So yeah, do you have any to add on that real quick?
So Dagaz is really all about freedom, bliss, sort of that sort of a Wunjo type energy where things are really starting to come into alignment and expand, you know, good fortune and expression, you know, like a very outward projection. So again, looking at this holistic perspective of the runes, where we've built our energy up and then we've refined it. And Dagaz to me is the full culmination of really just projecting that energy outwards, like the sun. What does the sun do? Is that sort of just explosion in a way of outward, and that kind of leads perfectly into the final rune, which is Othala.
1 second to add on that.
Okay.
What that brought up for me too is that, you know, being that outward explosion of the sun is it tapping into your soul desire, your orlog, you know, that purpose, that origin law that your soul wanted to achieve. So whenever you step into that fullest light, you know, seeing that luck, you know, not only when we do that, we're taking action on it, but then we experience that luck from the universe reflecting back to us, that because we're taking the action, we're getting in touch with our deepest self, we then experience, you know, bounty and luck and these other things like that. So interesting little add-in. Would you like to continue there?
Yeah, exactly. So that outward projection, you can see sort of countered in the final rune of Othala, which translates to inheritance. But what you can look at this as sort of like a return back into itself. Again, look at the rune. You know, here you have everything sort of exploding outwards, and then this is coming back down to the ground level. And this is very much indicative of the sort of the pendulum swings of the universe, where, you know, you breathe in and then you breathe out, and then it's summer and then it's winter, and it's this sort of oscillation of, you know, the law of vibration. Everything is constantly moving and in flux, and so it's like when you inherit something is being brought back to you. So you've got expansion and then coming back into it, and let's not forget that Kundalini goes down as well. This is another thing that's largely missed by a lot of very new age people, including myself. For a long time, I was not aware of that. Kundalini wells up and goes to the third eye and outwards, but it also comes back down, and fully, truly mastering this energy, you can't just ignore the second half of the process. Like, that's like trying to just only breathe in all the time. I mean, it's not going to work out very well for you, right? So
yeah, if you don't ground that energy properly, it can actually put you into a state of Kundalini psychosis. So a lot of people who experience this energy without knowing how to properly do that, that's why after they have that experience, it may be very blissful, but the next, you know, however long of a time period, you know, 6 months to a year after that, they kind of lose their mind for a little bit. And this was something I went through myself. And it's a lot of fucking work to get yourself out of that. So, you know, again, an excellent point there, that energy needs to be, you know, brought down and then grounded as well, for sure.
I love that you're using the word grounded, because I mean that's so symbolic in so many ways, because it's really easy to kind of get lost in all of these lofty, idealized ideas about philosophy and the universe and all this kind of thing. But if we're not having our feet firmly on the ground and knowing how to implement these practices in the real world, down here at the ground level, you know, you're going to get sort of lost and just be floating around without any real direction or like firmness to you. And so even as like an electrical sort of term, when you're dealing with great power, you want to make sure that you're grounded so that you're not just this loose, flapping around in the wind type of thing. Like you want to be very like planted.
And the interesting thing with Othala here, that you're using the word grounded, it also can relate to our ancestral land. So it's not only can it represent our spiritual inheritance, but it can represent, a physical inheritance as well, especially if it's coming up in like you're doing a rune divination using a reading. A lot of times it can refer to that. So very interesting connection there between those two. But this is a rune that, it shows that after you've mastered all the previous runes, you get to this one, you're then getting the inheritance of the knowledge of all those runes. So you have to, if you really want to master Othala and come into that full inheritance, you have to have mastered all the previous steps before this. And when you get to where you have, because remember this third eight is dealing with the spiritual level. So when we're getting to the last rune of that, we're fully getting to a place where we know how to spiritually master ourselves, and it is then that we receive the inheritance of the tribe and the inheritance of this knowledge. And the runes themselves, they are the spiritual inheritance of the Germanic people. As we said in the first one, when I was doing a little bit of the history introduction, the Elder Futhark, this is something that is unique to the indigenous people of Europe. No other group of people had the runes. They were something that was very specific. So there's a very special, for me, being of this lineage, this is a very special tool to work with, because it represents something that was very unique and is part of my spirit, and as yours as well, part of our spiritual inheritance.
Absolutely. Very, very good observation there. And again, we can kind of look at this in terms of a circle and a cycle. It's kind of like this, the rune Yira at play. It's down here somewhere. Where once we've come full circle, we started here and now we're back where we started again. And, that cycle of in and out and all around and in constant motion, where there really is no beginning or end to anything. Everything is all sort of interconnected and all moving about and in influence off of each other, like all these different variables, like this huge, crazy mathematical equation. And so it's like the cycle never ends. And I think life and death is very much the same way, where we appear to end in that individual incarnation, so to speak, but that process of the soul, of the evolution, is ever perpetuating forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then one last little thing on this rune here too is, being that it's the last rune that's mastered, that's when we can truly, we are truly becoming a fully functioning member of the tribe that can really contribute the most back. Is that this is why it's the last rune, is that it's when you've mastered all the other ones, then and only then when you receive that full inheritance of all the wisdom of the ancestors that have come before us.
And you can kind of look how the eighth of each of the three sets sort of has that sort of victory or inheritance energy about it, where the first eight ends with Wunjo, where once you've mastered those first eight, then you get to experience the joy that comes with that, and with being part of the tribe and connecting with friends and family and all that sort of thing. In the second, once you've mastered the psychological aspects of yourself, you are finally connected to the soul through soul willow. And then in the third eight, and then bringing it all together and tying it all together, you're getting the full spiritual inheritance of this particular lifetime, and you take that forward with you. Again, this was an initiation of manhood early on. Once you get that, that's not the end. That's really just the beginning of the rest of your life. So again, just always perpetual. And speaking for myself and Brian, these runes, just because we know what we know about them, we continually work with them each day, And not only are we forming a very realistic relationship with them, but them with us, and we're constantly downloading new things by working with these energies. And I mean, that's really the point. This isn't just a thing to intellectualize and you read a few books about the runes and then you've got this spirit. No, it's a practical. I mean, remember, like, get out of the books, put the Bible down, put the rune book down, and get in your body, in the Verdandi, in the now, and start living and taking action and really working with yourself as an alchemist. That's what this is all about. So again, this is a good starting point. We're introducing you to these runes to try to get you interested, but interested to start taking action with yourself and start forming your own personal relationship with the energies of the universe. And anyone can do this. Anyone can tap into this, even if you're not of European descent, but especially if you are, because, and this isn't just a playing favorites thing, it's that the DNA in your blood literally responds to psychic energy. Remember, your blood is mostly water. And we talked about earlier about how water is a channel and a storage for psychic energy. This blood in my veins right here has been alive for thousands of years, and having that charge built through ritual and through practice and using our words and things like that. This is really powerful stuff. This is not just, hocus pocus, airy fairy bullshit. This is for real. So again, if you have not checked out our initiation package, which includes the Toolbox video series, within that is the Rune Galder, where we actually teach you how to start working with these. It doesn't cost you anything to watch it. It doesn't cost you anything to start working with these energies. We can't stress this enough. It's always a good time to get started, even if you just spend a little bit of your time a day or once a week. It will speak for itself when you actually start working with them. So you got anything before I wrap this up you want to add there, Brian?
No, just that, again, this was just a quick introduction series here, and we're going to be going deeper into looking, breaking down each of the runes individually, more like looking at how we can get some esoteric lessons out of actually looking at the shape of the runes. We're also going to be teaching how to place them on the Helm of Awe in each of the worlds and how those correlate and respond. So a lot more in-depth information to come on these. This is just a jumping off point to, as Logan said, get you interested, but we are encouraging you. This is your call to action, to start working with these, developing a personal relationship and starting to come to know thyself on deeper and deeper levels.
Very well said. So we want to know what you think. Do you think that the runes are just, superstitious, primitive, make-believe stuff? Do you have experience with the runes yourself in your own life? Let us know about this. Feel free to contact us. Send us an email, contact at the Wizards on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for lots of knowledge memes and entertaining, funny memes as well. Random posts, updates on things. We're very busy behind the scenes working on a lot of really great stuff for you guys. We're very excited about. Again, don't forget to subscribe, be a part of our journey. We'd love to have you. And until next week, this is going to conclude our rune series. So until then, please be empowered, inspired, and encouraged.